And we're back. That's right. Welcome, everyone, to the 2 Minutes, Dos Minutos podcast. I'm Michael B., joined as always by Alf and producer Brian, and it is great to be back. Obviously, we've been on a pandemic-induced hiatus for the last year. As all of you know, our podcast originated and came from the beautiful Zeustek studios. We would record our podcast live in person. And once the pandemic struck, that certainly was not available to us. So that's where we've been. I promise you one thing, this podcast will not be a recap of what we've been doing throughout the pandemic, because we've all been doing the same thing that you guys have been doing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Same thing, different day. So the good news is we're all healthy. We've all stayed safe and healthy through the pandemic. And now producer Brian has been able to connect us virtually so we can restart the 2 Minutes, Dos Minutos podcast. And ultimately, and we hope, we're not sure exactly the time frame, but we hope within the coming months, we'll be back in the beautiful confines of the Zeustek studios, producing more and more content for the 2 Minutes, Dos Minutos podcast. But it's great to have you guys. It's great to see you guys and be back with everyone. I mean, just about everything's just absolutely came to a screeching halt a year ago.
That's right, Mike. It was crazy. And by the way, I miss all of you. I'm glad to be back. It's been wonderful. I mean, just to be back and just go through this process again with my friends and our listeners, our loyal listeners. I mean, as a matter of fact, Mike, we actually doubled our listeners while during the pandemic when we didn't record any new shows. It was unbelievable.
So are you saying we're the only, we might be the only outlet where the pandemic was good for us?
That's right. We even made more money during our commercial breaks, right? It's unbelievable. It's fantastic. So even though we stopped ourselves just like the rest of the nation, I know that people not only listened to us during the pandemic, but they clamored to say, hey, when are you going to come back? When are you going to give us all the things that you give us? For instance, we know we're going to give you a lot of dose of Michael B experience. We're going to do that. We're going to do that today. We're going to go over the NFL draft. We were not able to do that last year, Mike. That was our first year of doing the NFL draft. We'll have a pre-show, and then we'll try to do a live stream NFL first round draft show. And we have two guests that are loyal fans of us are going to be joining us as well in those podcasts. We're going to return with Mic'd Up. If you remember, Mic'd Up is, Mike will make boring or everyday sayings really exciting. So he'll make it with his voice. He'll make it exciting.
Forget Mic'd Up.
Yeah, that's right. And then we'll also have Spanglish words. People keep asking us, hey, when are you going to give us those Spanglish words? We really like that segment. We'll also bring back Say My Name. Say My Name is when Mike challenges producer Brian and myself to say difficult names to say that are sports related. Usually in the NBA, there's all these foreign players, and there's names that I can't even say. So he's going to teach us how to say them correctly. And of course, we'll do shout outs. And finally, at my expense, we'll do Al's pet peeves, things that really bother me. And people have been clamoring for me to actually start that process. But Mike, one of the things that we're coming back now, but one of the things that healed this nation is, the quick return of sports to return ourselves into our normalcy. How do we return to normal? And one of the things that happened on March 11th, the NBA stopped. I mean, it only had like a few games left. I think it was like 8 or 10 games left in the season, in the regular season. So I know that something happened. But the good news is we went through the NBA, life in the NBA, life in the bubble. And this whole new concept happened, and we started returning normal. We started viewing the playoffs, and then the NBA Finals with the Miami Heat. That was so exciting. So one of the things that we want to talk about in today's episode, really focus on, is the Michael B experience, life in the NBA bubble. So Mike, what happened on March 11th? What were you thinking of? What happened? Start from there, and then take us through that journey, if you will.
So March 11th was pretty surreal. The Miami Heat actually had a home game that night. We were playing the Charlotte Hornets, and everyone was well aware of COVID. And so the thinking amongst myself and my coworkers was the game March 11th was probably going to be the last game we played with fans in the arena. We figured, okay, I believe the 11th may have been a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I think our next home game was scheduled to be Friday. We figured, you know what? We're going to be back on Friday. It's going to be an empty building, but we're going to be playing basketball games. And so we're playing the Charlotte Hornets, and we break out to a huge first half lead. The team's playing great in the first half, and we go to halftime, come out for the second half, and sometime in the third quarter, notifications start coming through. People are getting messages. And we come to find out that the league has suspended the season.
Oh, wow.
Meaning all the games after that night would be suspended. So there was no more, well, we'll be back on Friday in an empty building. It was the season is temporarily suspended after tonight. And now everyone is wondering what's going on. The game ends. It doesn't end in the Heat's direction, but that's okay. But then we all leave that night having no idea what tomorrow is all about or what the future of this season is all about. You had mentioned it was close to the end of the season. There were 9 home games for the Miami Heat left.
Wow.
And so we all go home and have no idea what to expect. Come to find out, the NBA was kind of that first domino to fall once they temporarily suspended. Some other leagues followed suit, and the next thing you know, everything is locked down.
Yes.
And so we spent the better part, Alf, of 3 months not really knowing. We went through the rest of March. We went through April, May, and a lot of June, not really knowing our future until the league made the announcement that in early July, teams would be going to Orlando to complete the regular season and then compete in the playoffs in what everyone now knows was the NBA bubble. And the NBA bubble was simply that. It was an area that only insiders could be in. Outsiders were not allowed. And those insiders had a testing protocol of being tested every single day.
Mike, I have a question.
Now, sure.
In that bubble, you're isolated. You know, the players, the coaches, I guess, critical personnel. When did you get the call and know that you're going to be part of that process?
So I got, I was invited to apply to go to the bubble probably in June, early June. I had a conversation with my game operations director. His name is Josh Goshen. He sits directly to my right on game night. He's my right-hand guy. He's the guy that calls the show. And he and I both applied to go to the bubble. And I was given an opportunity to let them know how long I would go. I sat down with my wife, Natalie, and said, I'd like to apply to go. It's a 3-month stint. I mean, this is like a military thing almost, you know? So 3 months, I would have to be gone and I'd be in the bubble. So he and I both applied, and the league selected 4 PA announcers, and I was not one of them. So for all of our listeners, I did not physically go to the bubble, but I was in the bubble. And I'll explain that to everybody as we go on. But they picked 4 announcers. They picked 2 from the Eastern Conference and 2 from the Western Conference. Brooklyn, the Indiana Pacers, the Denver Nuggets, and the LA Clippers. And so those 4 gentlemen were the PA announcers in the bubble doing the actual work like I do every night at the American Airlines Arena for all the games that were being played. There were multiple games being played every day. And so my game operations director was selected to go to the bubble. So he was up there. He was a Miami Heat representative, and he was calling games and directing games for the NBA, along with probably half a dozen of his peers as well.
And Mike, when you went there, did you go through a specific hotel? Did you go to a quarantine? What was that process like to get started?
So even though I wasn't selected, I was given all of the information about what it would take in order to go into the bubble. And the requirement was that you would have to arrive on a certain date and you would have to remain in your hotel room for a certain number of days. And you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't leave. You couldn't go anywhere. And you were tested every day. And as long as you kept producing negative tests, you stayed there and you continued to, as I said, isolate or quarantine. So after that isolation quarantine period ended, you were then able to move throughout the bubble.
Wow.
Now, moving throughout the bubble was very limited. It was explained to me, it was going from your room, getting on transportation, going to the venue where the game you were assigned to is being played, and then returning back to your hotel. There was some free time where there was limited areas where you could get some exercise or work out or do what you wanted. But again, everything was very limited, very restrictive, as you can imagine, because we're going back to July, and we were just in the throes of this thing. Think about where we are now. What we know now would have been great. We didn't know as much back then, and so they were erring on the side of incredible caution. So movement was limited. What you did was limited. You went, you announced a game, you directed a game, you worked the game, whatever your work was for that game, and then you're back to your hotel, testing again the next day and repeating it every single day, every single day, every single day. And so that was the experience for the people inside the bubble.
What about your experience, Mike?
When it turned out that I was not going to be in the bubble announcing, the Miami Heat contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to record all of my announcements like I make them at the American Airlines Arena. And so they gave me a list of everything they wanted. They wanted every player's name announced like I would introduce them in the starting lineup or like they had just scored a basket. They wanted every player's name with their number so that if the starting lineup was interchanged, they could record me and play me introducing them in the starting lineup, and it would sound like it would at the American Airlines Arena.
That's great.
They wanted me to record three. So when a guy made a three-pointer, they would play that sound effect. They wanted stand up and make some noise for your Miami Heat. And they even played that in the bubble. And one of the AP writers, a good friend of the show, Tim Reynolds wrote in one of his columns that he thought the funniest moment in the history of the bubble is when my voice came blaring through the public address, imploring everyone to stand up and make some noise for your Miami Heat. And there was nobody in the bubble to stand up and make any noise. So Tim was on top of that. But more importantly, the most important thing that I got to record and put in the bubble was 2 minutes, dos minutos. And so 2 minutes, dos minutos made it to the bubble. Well after the whole bubble experience, my director comes back and he said, the 2 minutes, dos minutos was the hit of the bubble. Everybody wanted to know about it. He said, I got interviewed on it left and right. He said, it was fantastic. He said, from all parts of the country, they all wanted to talk about the 2 minutes, dos minutos thing. So that was my experience. And it's funny, as the Heat was going through this, guys, I was getting text messages and social media direct messages. Hey, are you in the bubble? Are you in the bubble? I hear you in the bubble. Are you in the bubble? Are you in the bubble? And I was not in the bubble ever, but my voice was in the bubble the entire time.
Got it. And by the way, I got to tell you, I did see you visually as well in these TVs, or I don't know what it was, but it looks like they were people sitting in their homes, and you were one of them. So there was they will pan the TV, and then you see all the fans, and I think you were one of them. So explain how that came about.
So now we are kind of, moving on, and the Heat has finished the regular season. All my recordings are up there, and now we are talking about getting ready for the playoffs. And when a team had a home game, their fans were allowed and encouraged to apply to become virtual fans. And so if you were selected to become a virtual fan, you would go into a Microsoft Teams room, and you would be in a room with about 30 other fans. And Microsoft programmed it so that when you put the entire 30 up on the screen, it looked like they were sitting in arena stadium chairs.
Yeah.
And they were sitting in a section. That's kind of the look that they tried to get for it. So as we're getting ready to start the playoffs, the Heat is trying to figure out ways how we can help the fan experience vis-a-vis Microsoft Teams. And so for every home game, you would get 10 or 11 of these team rooms. So you'd have room for a little over 300 fans. The visiting team would get one room. So they would have room for about 30 fans. And so when we would have a home game, we had 10 rooms. We started out with the idea of we would put a different member of the Heat entertainment team in one of the different rooms, and they would kind of be like the hype person for that room. Get those 30 people fired up and excited. So another good friend of the show, DJ M. Dot. DJ M. Dot was one of the hosts in one of those rooms. Also, for our Heat fans out there that know our in-arena host, Dale hosted one of those rooms. We had some Miami Heat dancers hosting some of those rooms. We had some guys from the Hoop Troop, our hype group. They were hosting, and I was in a room hosting. We quickly came to find out that depending on who the host was and how they were running the room, the experience was totally different. So if you were in my room, it was as if you were at the American Airlines Arena and I was announcing the game.
Of course.
If you were in Dale's room, it was like you were at the arena, and when they would go to timeouts at the game, he'd do trivia and he'd do contests. And if you were with the dancers, they were always answering questions. Everybody wanted to ask questions at the timeout of the dancers. What's it like? How often do you practice? These kind. So we all kind of had a different experience. And so the Heat wanted to try to make it a little more unified. And so they were able to tweak the technology a little bit. And for the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals, we were actually able to control audio and video for all 10 or so of our rooms for our home games. So what did that mean? That meant that we had our hosts in every room, but I was announcing the game like I would at the American Airlines Arena, and all of the rooms heard me.
Oh,
then at the timeouts, our director controlled the video. So we were able to show videos just like we would at the American Airlines Arena rather than the commercials that were going on during the game. And so that added to the Heat experience as well. And so that's the way we kind of brought everything together and made a spectacular run. Of course, we get to the NBA Finals, during a pandemic. when
Absolutely.
not one fan can be there. But over the course of those weeks between the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals, thousands of NBA and Miami Heat fans got a chance to experience it and also enjoy the Miami Heat experience. And I will tell you one special story. One night, and by the way, how this all happened, I wish it was as easy as to say I'm sitting right here in my home office and this is where I did it from. Nope, I had to go down to the American Airlines Arena and they set up an IT closet where all of this stuff was rigged. And so here I am in an IT closet about the size of a bedroom closet, screaming my head off, announcing the game, and it was some kind of experience. But the story I wanted to relate to you was one game. I got word that we were going to have a VIP in the one section. The game, it was a road game for the Heat. So we had one section and we were going to have a very special VIP. And they wanted me to go down and do my job from the IT closet. So I was like, okay. It turns out the special guest in our section that night was none other than Dwayne Wade. And so there's Dwayne Wade sitting in the front row of the virtual section with his adorable daughter, Kavia, in his lap. And I come to find out when I arrived, I knew it was D Wade, but when I get there, the director tells me, you get to interview Dwayne Wade during one of the timeouts tonight. So I got a chance. Dwayne and I got a chance to do a little one-on-one interview. He was awesome. It was just a great experience. It was awesome to see him and his beautiful daughter, and to watch him watch his team right there in the NBA playoffs. That was just a great story.
Fabulous. That's so amazing. And the way you guys took advantage of the technology, great.
Well, I can see that your room now is bigger than the IT closet. That's for sure.
Yeah. This office that I'm in is about 10 times bigger than that IT closet, let me tell you. But you know what? Whatever it took to bring the Heat experience to our fans, it was an incredibly special time. It was the most unusual time of ever, frankly. Think about it. You're playing these games in front of nobody. It was
Absolutely.
very odd and unusual.
It was incredible, Mike. It was an incredible journey. We needed it. We needed this as a nation. We needed to cure. We needed to kind of go out of this whole thing, this funk we were in, and having the NBA Finals with the Miami Heat. That was incredible during this whole pandemic situation. I personally just loved every minute of it, and watching you and going through this experience, it really gives our listeners an idea of what you went through and how exciting it was. Especially how you ended it with interviewing Dwayne Wade. That's unbelievable. What do you think, Brian?
I know. I think that's amazing. Just to have the opportunity kind of to be there in this whole kind of like the experience itself throughout the pandemic it's truly an amazing thing. And what they did for the public, for the viewers and everything like that, I think was great. And I think everybody appreciates it as well.
It was a remarkable story. I'm going to say, even though we came up just 2 games short of the championship, it was a huge success for the Miami Heat. It was an enormous success for the NBA, as no one tested positive during that entire bubble play. Wow. And so hats off to the NBA and what they accomplished, but even more so to our Miami Heat and what they were able to deliver to South Florida and all Heat fans everywhere. And it was an experience like no other. And looking back on it, guys, I'm really happy that they didn't ask me to go into the bubble, because I got to work with and help out and be a part of the Heat experience for Heat fans that were enjoying this experience, and we were doing it together. Had I been in the bubble, I would have been removed and isolated from all the Heat fans. And so, in hindsight, it worked out great.
Well, I can tell you, Mike, our Heat fans love it. I know our 2 Minutes Dos Minutos podcast listeners love it. And with that said, before we go to our NFL draft shows, we're going to go to another Michael B experience in our next episode. So we can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, that'll be a little different. It'll certainly have an NBA twist to it, but I'll just tease it with it's a lot of Q-tips down the throat and up the nose. I'll tell you more about that in the next episode of 2 Minutes, Dos Minutos. Thank you all for coming back. It's great to be back. It's great to see you guys and be with you again. And we look forward to you all listening to us in future podcasts. Take care, everybody.